Okay, we're live.
Excellent. Great.
Yep.
Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our first Google Hangout on Air for Diversity Best Practices. My name is Brian Baker, and I'm the General Manager of Diversity Best Practices. And today we're really thrilled to be here talking to our members, featuring some expertise, and really making the connection from our recent member meeting in Richmond for the second quarter. So today really represents our first Google Hangout on Air, and many of our members know that we are absolutely committed at DBP to really providing resources, expertise, thought leadership, and conversation to our memberships, to our members, in a number of different channels and varieties. So in-person events, publications, our books, white papers, and as you're witnessing here, through social media as well. So using the Google Hangout on Air format, we can really provide the opportunity to continue dialogues from our recent meetings, continue to interact with members, allow members to ask questions, gain additional insights, and really follow up so that we're continuing that conversation that many of you enjoy when we get together quarterly or in some of our webinars as well. So today's Hangout is a follow-up, as I said, from our second quarter member conference, which was held in Richmond at Capital One and focused on, legally speaking, the multifaceted D&I legal challenges facing lines of business. And the conversations were lively, insightful, and we really had the chance to hear from a number of different stakeholders around how to partner with legal and other parts of the enterprise. So I'm thrilled today to introduce our esteemed keynote, one of our new great friends at Diversity Best Practices, Larry Turner. Larry was a keynote, as I mentioned, at the event. And before I get started and really take some questions and start the dialogue, I want to do a few quick kind of how-tos so that we're all familiar with Google Hangout on Air. So as I mentioned, the program is meant to be interactive. You can type in your questions in the space to the right of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer throughout. We've already gotten several questions, so thank you for reaching out ahead of time and entering those. The questions are public, so if you see a question that interests you, feel free to click on it, and that'll bump it up in its ranking, and we'll address it. So the content of this program today is not legal advice, but rather is general information for educational purposes. So you should not act or refrain from acting based on today's program. I hope Larry is impressed with me, with my ability to hit the legalese on this program. And without further ado, I want to introduce Larry Turner. So Larry is a partner in Morgan Lewis's labor and employment practice and co-chair of his firm's diversity committee. Mr. Turner's practice focuses on employment litigation cases involving federal and state anti-discrimination, wrongful termination, restrictive covenants, and trade secrets. I would add to this before I turn it over to Larry. He provided incredible insight. We're absolutely thrilled to have him today. Larry, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Brian. Glad to be here.
Great. So I want to just get kicked off on kind of our conversation, and before I start on some of our questions that we've had entered, I'd love to get your thoughts, Larry, on how did you see our program? What were some of your thoughts? Maybe some conversations that were highlights for you when our members and us got together recently.
Brian, I thought it was a great program. I really enjoyed the exchange of ideas, and I thought it was the perfect size to provide the attendees an opportunity to take their conversations. Many of us were meeting each other for the first time to another level, and it gave us an opportunity to establish some chemistry as well as gain some insights and share ideas. And the diversity of views that came to the forefront during the course of the meeting were really outstanding. It gave me new inspiration for some of the things that I'm doing within my own firm, in addition to having an opportunity to share some of my thoughts with others.
Great. Well, let's just dive right in some of our questions. I think the one part where we spent a lot of time on that I'd love to get your kind of follow-up on is just how D&I and legal should be collaborating, and specifically, when should D&I be reaching out and bringing legal into the diversity conversation?
Great question, Brian. I think that D&I should bring legal into the diversity conversation at the very, very beginning. And the reason, or there's several reasons for that. The first is you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to cut down on the speculation for the various initiatives that the group will be hopefully putting forward, and you focus on the facts and the data that will provide a meaningful platform for the company to create and pursue meaningful aspirational goals. You also want to make sure that you protect any discussions and or analysis that is going to take place right out of the box. Because if you don't, it really is true that once the horse is out of the barn, it's next to impossible to get back in. And you want to make sure that you don't have a misstep right out of the gate. And last but not least, believe it or not, legal can offer perspectives on some of the aspirational goals that can help save the committee a lot of time on the front end. And in efforts of this type, you want to cut down on the missteps as much as possible, because usually the more missteps you have, the more you undercut the enthusiasm that you have for the initiatives that you're trying to pursue.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Let's go right into some of the questions from our members. The most popular one is, we are always looking for ways to best utilize ERGs, employee resource groups, to further their business impact. Larry, what is your advice for companies in regards to ERGs?
ERGs are a great, great tool if used properly. First and foremost, my recommendation is that for any business, you make sure that you tie your ERGs into a legitimate business purpose, whatever that may be for you. Second, make sure that you establish some type of credible and realistic criteria for you to evaluate which ERGs you're going to recognize as a company. Once you do that, make sure that you adhere to it and you follow it religiously with respect to all of the ERGs that approach you with respect to being recognized by your company. Also, use them. ERGs are a great way, fantastic way to improve your hiring, your retention, as well as your promotions. For example, with hiring, it's a great opportunity for you to use people who have already grown accustomed to your particular work environment as a way to identify new people to bring into your pipeline. From the standpoint of retention, can you imagine a better source of mentors than those people who are participating in your ERGs, who know what the atmosphere is like within your company, have already begun to see what it's like to work through both the good times and hopefully not so many bad times, but they happen as well, and to identify those characteristics that will help those employees move up the ladder. And that goes to the third point with respect to promotion. ERGs and the management of them is a great way to test new talent. See how well they organize the ERGs. You know, what types of activities do they have going on? That could be a great testing ground for your next level of managers.
That's great. You know, Larry, I would follow up the point on retention, because we spent a lot of time in our first quarter member meeting talking about retention, diversity, and the opportunities of ERGs, as well as other diversity and inclusion initiatives inside the enterprise. So a great resource for members in addition to this is the Q1 member meeting and the recap of that, and we'd love to continue to share that with members. Thanks for that. Let's move to our second question, which is, can you share, Larry, some examples of the impact on the business that partnerships between D&I and legal often yield?
Good question. Impact on, I think the impact that comes to mind from a business perspective is the saving of time and money if legal is involved from the very beginning on the D&I initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, missteps can be costly in this space, not only from the standpoint of enthusiasm, but also from the standpoint of resources, time, and money. Any of the three of those could be deadly to the overall diversity initiative. Um, an example that comes to mind for me is, without mentioning any client names, a situation in which a diversity committee wanted to pursue a certain type of social event. The event had not been cleared by legal, had not been discussed with senior management either. It ended up being one that was canceled on the eve of the event because, as things would have it, senior management eventually found out and was not pleased. They then questioned legal, and then legal became involved, and it was a complete unraveling and derailing of an event that, had it been planned a little better, could have been a real hit for the committee right out of the gate.
Great. You know, I hear this perspective a lot, and you know, an instance like that example you're giving often leads to a number of different things, right? Frustrated people, a lack of engagement in diversity, oftentimes distrust in the organization, and you know, quite frankly, doesn't help anyone across the whole stakeholder group. So I definitely can appreciate that as example specifically. Let's move on to one more member question. And Larry, many of our members were interested in gaining insights into the role legal departments can play in their innovative retention efforts. And I stress the innovative opportunity there. So Larry, what are your thoughts on real specific details around that opportunity for legal?
It's an absolute great opportunity because so many of our business colleagues forget that your legal departments, for the most part, are facing the same issues that you are from the standpoint of diversity and inclusion. And it's another way for you to, no pun intended, diversify your thought process on dealing with these issues. For example, one of the techniques that we routinely recommend to our clients in this space is to make an extra effort to obtain your employees' feedback in an expression of interest type of format of what they're interested in to help you with your diversity goals. That suggestion came from legal, a legal department actually. And basically what it does is it gives the employee an opportunity to self-express either a position, an activity, or some other type of development method that he or she may want to pursue in order to enhance their own career and at the same time provide the company with additional work and support. But for that type of program, you would have basically management trying to guess from the top down what the employees want as opposed to listening to the employees, and it's a great way to get them involved. And I thought that at the time it was a great example of legal actually being innovative in its approach to diversity and inclusion, and it's been a very, very successful process for the company that adopted it.
And wouldn't you agree, Larry, that it's not even just retention, right? It's also recruiting.
Oh,
for
absolutely.
instance, in the keynote, we also heard about where there was risk in recruiting, about you know, really thinking about advancement of women. There were other anecdotes too, but it just isn't extended only to retention.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, before we take the next question, I just would love to encourage attendees on today's Google Hangout to ask additional questions. We want to make sure we cover all of them, and we'd love to get a few more in. So please ask your questions. Let's move on to the next member question, Larry. What best practices have you seen in your work with D&I practitioners and their departments, in their partnerships with legal? So, you know, what are some best practices that you've seen that you suggest our members take forward?
I think probably the best practice has been a proactive team approach with respect to D&I issues. And by that I mean including legal, a representative from the HR space, space, a diversity and inclusion professional, if you have one, If you don't, you may want to consider in your particular company going out and retaining one. Also including someone from the business side of the house in that initial core group of people who will be fashioning your diversity and inclusion initiatives. I think if you have that type of setting and include legal, you avoid the last minute running things by legal that usually ends up in the no answer being given and slowing down the process. Being proactive and including those people from the very, very start makes the process far more efficient, and it yields for a better product in the end.
Mm-hmm. Larry, just one quick follow-up. You know, when I talk to members and they talk about partnership with legal, it often comes in a conversation around data. Can you talk to us a little bit about your point of view around data, whether it's benchmarking, providing data, etc.? What are your thoughts and what are your recommendations?
I think that's a great question, Brian, for a couple of reasons. In my view, in order to craft a responsible diversity and inclusion program for any company, you must start with the right data. And once you have it, you must analyze it in a way that makes sense for your company. All too often, one of the problems that I see in this space is companies relying upon data that really has no reflection upon the way in which they do business. They rely upon either industry data or data by other companies or groups that they want to emulate, but that's not their workforce composition. So first and foremost, start with your data. Now, with respect to what you do with it, there's some aspects of your data that are going to be public, but some aspects of it will not. And that's where I think working with legal will do you and your company a great service from the standpoint of helping you to identify those portions of your data, whether it be an analysis or an identification of some type of explanation for action that was taken in the past, or actions that you want to take in the future. Making sure that those are placed in the right perspective so that you're working from facts as opposed to speculation. Last but not least, data will keep you grounded from the standpoint of setting realistic aspirational goals. Where you do not want to be in the D&I space is in a situation where you are setting goals. While they sound great as a soundbite, you as a company have no possible opportunity to ever meet. And that is probably one of the greatest sources of not only frustration, but potential legal risk down the road.
Yeah. You know, I wonder, given that a huge part of what we provide and work with members on at Diversity Best Practices is our benchmarking. And I often wonder, are members going back to legal with the DBP benchmarking and having conversations? And if that is an opportunity that the legal teams are actually interested in, but might not be happening.
I certainly hope they are, because I think that is a great way to not only get the conversation started, but to make sure that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and in a direction that's really right for your organization, your culture, and your business objectives.
Yep.
Good. So if we go off of the data and onto the next member question, Larry, do you have any suggestions on how organizations and leaders can improve communication with D&I leaders around the benefits and risks that legal can provide?
I do. Bring them to the table early and often. Start out with that small group that I identified earlier, legal, business, diversity professional, and someone from human resources who is in a position of authority. Each of those folks, if they're participating in the dialogue from the very beginning, it will help your communications down the road tremendously. Two other folks that you may want to include in that conversation to make sure that your messaging is consistent would be marketing, as well as any type of business professional within your organization who is responsible for operations. You want to make sure that whatever initiatives that you communicate to the workforce are initiatives that are actually realistic from the standpoint of being able to be accomplished. If you are suggesting, for example, that, and this is a hypothetical, every Friday at 4 o'clock, everyone on the floor stop for an hour to have coffee or tea, but that also happens to be the time that shipping is coming in and needs everything loaded onto whatever means of transportation you're using to ship your product. That's not going to work. So you need to make sure that you have, someone from operations or someone familiar with what's happening on the floor involved as well, so that your messaging, whether it be a lofty goal or a new way in which to carry out an initiative, is married to reality.
Yeah. You started that response, Larry, with bring them to the table early and often, and we've heard this as sage advice from you around bringing legal and other stakeholders to the table. It sounds and feels pretty intuitive. So I guess my question as a follow-up is, so where does it go wrong for our members, for organizations and leaders? Where is the complexity?
The complexity is, Brian, and it goes wrong when you have a group that hasn't been formed properly in the beginning, and you have a group of one, or you have a situation where the diversity initiatives or responsibility has been delegated to one, and that one person is not in the loop with respect to the other key factors in a business. For example, let's not make a mistake here from the standpoint of diversity being the business of the day for each and every one of your members. Your members are in the business of making money in whatever industry they're involved in. If diversity is not married to whatever they're doing, it is going to be placed in a silo, never to be seen from. If they being the diversity group, committee, is not linked into, let's say, the business plan for the business for the next 5 years, they are going to be working with data and on initiatives that are going to be stale by the time they hit the floor. They need to stay involved and need to be aware of where the business is going. For example, if the business is planning to change directions within the next 5 years to move from being a research institution to a manufacturing institution, and all of your diversity initiatives are based upon bringing in diverse talent from a research side of the house, you've wasted an opportunity, you've wasted resources at that point that the company really won't be able to use. You really need to stay attuned with what's happening, and you would be surprised how often that happens. The same thing is true from the legal side of the house. The laws in this area have been in a state of flux for years. There really are no bright line tests per se to say what is right and what is wrong. It is truly a scale of measuring risk and your risk tolerance for a particular approach. With that said, there have been a number of decisions, both from the higher court and the lower courts over the last few years, that might provide some light on the best possible strategy for now. Not written in stone, but some light has been provided. You need to be aware of those as you're moving forward.
Great, thank you. One more question, which is a little different from the last one, but we are spending a lot of time working with members, working on training and talking about unconscious bias. I would love your perspective from a legal view on unconscious bias in the organization and where this is a risk.
Wow. That is, in my view, probably one of the hot areas in the future, because it's very difficult to put your arms around what is unconscious bias, because by definition, it, for the most part, is not something that you as an individual are acting on with any degree of alleged intent there. I attended a program recently in which that was discussed, and I for one, was quite impressed by the fact that, at least at this point, as I see the issue, from a legal perspective, the best approach with respect to unconscious bias is training. Making sure that your workforce, particularly your managers, both middle management and senior managers, receive as much training as possible so that they are at least aware of their own biases, which we all have. The question is not whether you have the biases or not, it's how you handle them in the workplace. And I think that from a legal perspective, that's one of the areas that we will probably see surface more over the next 5 to 10 years will be issues sparked by that type of discussion.
Good. Just one sort of general question, too. Given we're on Google Hangout today, talk about how technology either is a risk or an opportunity, especially social media, when you think about sharing information, perspectives, right? So what are your thoughts on how technology can assist or provide risk in this space?
I'll start with assist. I think
Good.
This program is a great example of how technology can assist in the diversity space from the standpoint of making it available to a wider variety of people without impacting too greatly upon their day. The risks, however, are also substantial. For example, with email, if you are not careful with your use of email or tweeting or things of that nature, the wrong message, particularly if it is not a message that has been vetted and one that has been approved by the company, can take shape and a life of its own within a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
In light of social media the way it stands today, and it's another reason why it is so important that your messaging in this space be messaging that in many instances needs to go beyond the usual manner of handling company type messaging, because you have to keep in mind that messaging in this space goes beyond just a single employee. One comment, one misstatement on a policy, one misstatement with respect to an initiative usually affects an entire group of employees, and that could mean substantial risks for the company down the road, as well as for your diversity and inclusion initiatives.
So just as we wrap up, Larry, I'd love to just ask a question about your current role as the co-chair of the diversity committee at your firm. Would just love a quick 1-minute response on what are you most looking forward to accomplishing this year?
I think I'm most excited about trying to attack the things that we're doing globally. We are a global law firm, and as you know, Brian, diversity means different things to different people around the world. As recently as, I believe, last year, for example, in India, there was a new law passed against certain type of LGBT issues in India. And figuring out how we are going to handle ourselves and counsel our clients on those issues, I think will be one of my high priorities for this upcoming year. The other thing will be working with firm management as our new chair, who is a woman, will be coming on board to take our diversity and inclusion efforts to new heights. We're very proud to have Jamie McKeon as our new, or as our chair-elect, and I'm very excited about working with her for years to come to further energize our program and hopefully continue to see great results.
Great.
We could work something out specifically, or yeah.
Hello, I think we have lost I think we have lost Brian Baker. Hi, I'm Narendra Leguia, but we're about to wrap up anyway. Thank you so much, Larry, for joining us today in this Google Hangout, our first Google Hangout. And thank you to all the viewers that joined. Thank you for the people who submitted their questions in advance. And if you have any more questions, you can send them to Jennifer London at Diversity Best Practices, and she will be able to send them either to Brian or to Larry Turner. Oh, hello, this is me. And yes, thank you so much for joining. All of you, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.